April 23, 2018. Radnor Township, Pennsylvania. In a quiet neighborhood lined with tree-shaded streets, a tragedy was about to unfold that would leave two families shattered forever and an entire community reeling in disbelief. It was a day that began like any other, but by the time the sun set, two lives would be lost in a brutal, calculated act that no one saw coming. And at the center of it all were three people caught in a web of secrets, lies, and unrelenting heartbreak. Jennair Gerardot, a woman once described as fiercely loyal, deeply committed, and intelligent. For decades, she had stood by her husband Mark through every challenge, every move, and every hardship. But beneath the surface of their seemingly ordinary life, cracks were beginning to show. And when Mark began working at the University of Delaware, those cracks widened. He found himself drawn to someone new, someone vibrant, driven, and charismatic, Meredith Chapman. What began as a professional relationship soon crossed boundaries that could never be undone. Mark and Meredith, both seeking something they felt was missing in their lives, made a choice. And Jennair knew. She knew something was wrong long before Mark ever confessed. She could feel it. The distance, the late nights, the whispered conversations. It wasn't just suspicion, it was certainty. And that certainty consumed her. She couldn't let go, couldn't look away. And as her world began to unravel, Jennair made a decision of her own. This is a story of love that turned to betrayal. A story of a marriage pushed to its breaking point. Of a woman who felt she had nothing left to lose. And of the devastating choices that followed. In this documentary, we will walk through the lives of Jennair Gerardot, Mark Gerardot, and Meredith Chapman. We'll uncover the events that led to that fateful day piece by piece, until we reach the moment where everything changed. This is not just a story of a crime. It's a story of human emotions pushed to their very limits. And it's a story that, once you hear it, you won't be able to forget. If you appreciate well-researched true crime stories, don't forget to like this video, subscribe to our channel, and turn on notifications. Your support allows us to continue bringing you these in-depth narratives. Now let's begin. To truly understand the events that unfolded in April of 2018, we need to go back. Back to where it all began, to the lives of three people whose paths would intertwine in a way that no one could have predicted. First, we meet Jennair Gerardot. Born Jennair Cox in Fort Wayne, Indiana, she was known to those around her as intelligent, driven, and fiercely determined. She grew up in a modest household, developing a strong sense of responsibility early on. Jennair was the kind of woman who took pride in everything she did. Whether it was her career in marketing or her marriage, she gave her all. But beneath that determined exterior was someone who struggled deeply with self-worth and insecurity. Over time, these struggles would become the foundation for the tragic choices she made. Then there was Mark Gerardot, Jennair's husband of nearly 25 years. Mark was charming, ambitious, and career-driven. He worked in creative marketing, a field that often required long hours, frequent travel, and constant networking. For years, Mark and Jennair had what seemed to be a solid partnership. They moved from city to city, chasing career opportunities, and navigating the ups and downs of life together. But as the years went by, the cracks in their relationship grew wider. Financial stress, frequent relocations, and unspoken resentments began to take their toll. And finally, there was Meredith Chapman. A rising star in the world of marketing and communications, Meredith was vibrant, charismatic, and fiercely independent. Born and raised in Delaware, she had a deep connection to her community. She served as a marketing professional, a university professor, and even ran for public office. Meredith was married, but by the time she crossed paths with Mark Gerardot, her marriage was on shaky ground. Like Mark, she was seeking something more, something she felt was missing from her life. Three individuals. Three different paths. But all were searching for something they couldn't quite find. And it was this search that would bring them together in a way that would end in unimaginable tragedy. It was the mid-2010s. The Geradots had just moved to Delaware after Mark accepted a prestigious position at the University of Delaware. The area was known for its historic charm, tree-lined streets, and close-knit communities. Radnor Township, where Meredith lived, was a quiet, affluent suburb of Philadelphia. It was the kind of place where people felt safe, where neighbors greeted each other with a smile, and where life moved at a comfortable pace. But beneath that serene surface, tension was building in ways that no one could see. Picture the scene. The air is crisp with the scent of spring flowers. Children play in front yards while parents chat on porches. It's the kind of neighborhood where doors are often left unlocked, and the biggest concern is what to bring to the next community gathering. But behind closed doors, lives were unraveling. The Gerardots' marriage was hanging by a thread. Mark was working closely with Meredith, and their connection grew stronger with each passing day. Meanwhile, Jennair was increasingly isolated, struggling to find her place in this new chapter of their lives. Jennair's personality, once defined by strength and determination, began to shift. Friends and family noticed a change in her demeanor. She became more withdrawn, more anxious. And as Mark's behavior became more distant, Jennair's suspicions grew. She was meticulous by nature, and when she felt something was off, she couldn't ignore it. She started monitoring his phone, tracking his movements and recording conversations. It wasn't paranoia. To her, it was survival. It was the only way to protect what she believed was hers. Mark, on the other hand, was drawn to Meredith's energy and optimism. In Meredith, he saw a new beginning, a chance to break free from the burdens of his marriage and start fresh. But he underestimated the depth of Jennair's pain. He underestimated how far she would go to uncover the truth. And then there was Meredith. Young, ambitious, and full of life. She had no idea that her relationship with Mark would place her in the middle of a deadly triangle. She believed in second chances, in new beginnings. But she never imagined that her pursuit of happiness would lead to such a tragic end. At the time, discussions around mental health, emotional abuse, and infidelity were becoming more prevalent in society. But even so, many people struggled in silence. Jennair was one of those people. She felt trapped, by her marriage, by her circumstances, and by her own mind. And as her isolation grew, so did her desperation. As we move forward, keep these backgrounds in mind. These were real people with real emotions and real struggles. And what happened next would forever change the lives of everyone involved. Let's take a closer look at the chain of events that led to that fateful day in April 2018. By late 2017, the relationship between Mark Gerardot and Meredith Chapman had shifted. What began as a professional connection between two colleagues was now becoming something more. It was subtle at first. A shared glance here, a lingering conversation there. But over time, those small moments grew into something undeniable. And while Mark was falling for Meredith, Jennair was beginning to realize that her marriage was slipping away. Mark Gerardot, in his new role as creative director at the University of Delaware, worked closely with Meredith Chapman, the university's director of marketing. Meredith was everything Mark admired: confident, driven, and charismatic. She was passionate about her work and had an energy that Mark found captivating. Their professional collaboration quickly evolved into personal conversations. They shared stories about their lives, their struggles, and their dreams for the future. It wasn't long before those conversations turned into something more intimate. Both Mark and Meredith were navigating difficult times in their marriages. Mark felt that his relationship with Jennair had grown stagnant over the years. The financial struggles, frequent relocations, and emotional distance had taken a toll. For Meredith, her marriage was also on the rocks. She was seeking fulfillment and happiness, something she no longer felt in her relationship. In each other, Mark and Meredith found a sense of excitement and possibility. But their growing bond would come at a devastating cost. Meanwhile, Jennair Gerardot was becoming increasingly suspicious. Mark's behavior had changed. He was more distant, more secretive. The late nights at work, the sudden interest in his appearance, the hushed phone calls, it all pointed to something Jennair couldn't ignore. Jennair wasn't the type to let things slide. She was meticulous and methodical. And when she felt that something was wrong, she needed to know the truth. Her suspicions led her down a dark path, one that would consume her entirely. It started with small things. She checked his phone when he wasn't looking. She asked questions about his schedule. But as her suspicions grew, so did her efforts to uncover the truth. Jennair installed tracking devices on Mark's car, allowing her to see his every move. She placed recording devices in his belongings to capture his conversations. And in a move that would reveal everything, she cloned Mark's phone, gaining access to his messages and emails in real time. Imagine the moment Jennair saw the first incriminating message. The confirmation of her worst fears right there on her screen. The man she had spent decades building a life with was betraying her. And now she had the proof. But instead of confronting Mark immediately, Jennair kept watching. She documented everything, each message, each call, each meeting. Became an obsession. She needed to know every detail, every lie. And with each discovery, her despair deepened. Jennair was spiraling. The woman who had once been strong and self-assured was now consumed by anxiety and heartbreak. She became increasingly isolated, withdrawing from friends and family. The constant surveillance of Mark's activities took a toll on her mental health. Every message she read, every call she overheard, felt like another stab in the heart. There's no doubt that Jennair was struggling with her mental health during this time. The betrayal, combined with her own insecurities and the sense of losing control over her life, pushed her to a breaking point. She documented her pain in journals, writing about her loneliness, her anger, and her desperation. In one entry she wrote, "I gave my life to him and he threw it all away." Her world was crumbling and she didn't know how to stop it. What makes this story so haunting is the depth of Jennair's pain. She wasn't just a woman scorned. She was someone who felt utterly abandoned, left with nothing but the shattered pieces of her life. And while Mark and Meredith were looking toward a new future, Jennair was sinking further into despair. As Jennair continued to monitor Mark, she gathered more evidence. Each piece of information confirmed what she already knew. And with every discovery, her resolve hardened. She wasn't going to let Mark walk away from their marriage without consequences. In one recording, Jennair's voice can be heard, calm but resolute. "I know what you're doing," she says. "You think I don't see it, but I do." It's chilling to hear her words, knowing what would come next. The affair between Mark and Meredith wasn't just a betrayal. It was a catalyst. A spark that ignited a chain of events leading to tragedy. And as Jennair's suspicions turned into certainty, the stage was set for a confrontation that would change everything. April 23, 2018. A date that would mark the tragic culmination of months of emotional turmoil, obsession, and heartbreak. On this day, 3 lives would be forever changed. But the path to that fateful moment was one paved with meticulous planning and an unrelenting determination by Jennair Gerardot to confront the woman she believed had stolen her husband. The day began like any other for Meredith Chapman. She had recently moved into a new home in Radnor Township, Pennsylvania. Unaware of the storm brewing beneath the surface, she was preparing for what she thought would be a normal evening. But Jennair Gerardot had other plans. In the days leading up to April 23, Jennair meticulously plotted her next move. She rented a car to avoid detection, ensuring that no one would trace her movements back to her. She drove from Delaware to Pennsylvania, parking the rental vehicle a short distance from Meredith's home. Jennair knew she couldn't risk being recognized. She wore a disguise, a wig, dark clothing, gloves, anything to conceal her identity. She wasn't acting on impulse. This was calculated, deliberate. Each step of her plan had been carefully thought out. And as she approached Meredith's house, Jennair was resolved to see it through to the end. The front door was locked, but that didn't deter Jennair. She found a way inside, breaking into Meredith Chapman's residence with a chilling sense of purpose. Once inside, she didn't search the house. She didn't ransack the rooms or leave a mess. Instead, she found a place to wait. And she waited for hours. Imagine the silence of that house. The quiet ticking of a clock, the faint hum of distant traffic. And there, in the shadows, Jennair Gerardot, waiting. Her heart pounding, her mind racing. The woman who had consumed her thoughts for months would soon walk through that door. Around 7 p.m., Meredith Chapman arrived home. She had no idea what awaited her inside. As she unlocked the door and stepped inside, Jennair emerged from the shadows. What happened next is a scene of unimaginable horror. Jennair confronted Meredith, and in a matter of moments, the confrontation turned deadly. The weapon Jennair carried was a Taurus Tracker .357 Magnum, a powerful revolver she had purchased weeks prior. It was registered in her name. With a steady hand, she aimed the gun at Meredith Chapman and pulled the trigger. The sound of the shot echoed through the house, piercing the quiet evening air. Meredith Chapman was fatally wounded. But Jennair's plan didn't end with Meredith's death. She had no intention of walking away from that house. She had written letters detailing her intentions. She knew this was the end for her as well. After shooting Meredith, Jennair turned the gun on herself. One final act of control in a situation that had spiraled beyond her grasp. The same revolver that ended Meredith's life was now pointed at Jennair. And with a final pull of the trigger, it was over. 2 lives lost in a matter of moments. The weapon, a Taurus Tracker .357 Magnum, was significant. It wasn't a random purchase. Jennair had chosen it carefully, knowing the power it wielded. It was the instrument of her final, irreversible act. While Jennair and Meredith lay dead inside the house, Mark Gerardot was on his way to meet Meredith for dinner. They had plans that evening. But when Meredith didn't show up, Mark grew concerned. He drove to her house, hoping to find her there. What he found instead was a scene of horror. The door was ajar. The silence inside was deafening. And as he stepped inside, Mark was confronted with the unthinkable. The bodies of his wife and his lover, both lifeless on the floor. In a state of shock, Mark called the police. His voice trembled as he reported the scene. The dispatcher on the other end of the line tried to keep him calm, but the gravity of what Mark had walked into was overwhelming. When officers arrived, they initially treated Mark as a suspect. After all, it's not uncommon for the spouse to be involved in such cases. But as investigators pieced together the timeline and evidence, it became clear that Mark was not responsible for the deaths. He was a man caught in the middle of a tragedy he never anticipated. The investigation that followed would uncover the meticulous planning behind Jennair's actions, the emotional torment she endured, and the devastating consequences of betrayal and heartbreak. In the next chapter, we'll delve into the investigation, the clues left behind, the questions that remained, and the public's reaction to this tragic case. In the aftermath of the tragic events at Meredith Chapman's home, police quickly moved to secure the scene and piece together what had happened. The investigation that followed would reveal a chilling level of premeditation and uncover the deeply rooted emotional turmoil that led Jennair Gerardot to commit such an unthinkable act. When officers from the Radnor Township Police Department arrived at the scene, they were met with a chaotic and haunting sight. Two bodies lay in the living room, Meredith Chapman and Jennair Gerardot. The officers immediately secured the area, treating it as a potential double homicide. Yellow crime scene tape was stretched across the quiet suburban street, and the once peaceful neighborhood became the epicenter of a chilling investigation. Inside the house, forensic teams meticulously examined the scene. Blood spatter patterns, bullet trajectories, and the positioning of the bodies all provided crucial clues. The revolver, a Taurus Tracker .357 Magnum, was found near Jennair's body. The gun was registered to her, confirming that she had brought it with her, fully intending to end both her life and Meredith's. As detectives combed through the scene, they discovered items that hinted at Jennair's planning. Disguises, handwritten notes, and the rental car parked nearby were all pieces of a puzzle that would soon reveal a deeply disturbing narrative. As investigators dug deeper into Jennair Gerardot's background, they uncovered a web of surveillance and tracking that painted a picture of a woman consumed by betrayal and heartbreak. Detectives found that Jennair had gone to extraordinary lengths to monitor her husband's affair. She had installed tracking devices on Mark's car, allowing her to trace his movements with precision. Her use of technology didn't stop there. Jennair had secretly placed recording devices in Mark's clothing and personal belongings, capturing conversations between him and Meredith. One of the most shocking discoveries was the cloning of Mark's phone. Jennair had gained access to his messages, emails, and call logs, effectively giving her a window into his private life. This level of intrusion highlighted her desperation to uncover the truth and confirm her suspicions about the affair. The evidence collected by police showed that Jennair's actions were far from impulsive. She had spent weeks, if not months, planning her confrontation with Meredith. From purchasing the gun to tracking Mark's every move, Jennair's behavior exhibited a disturbing level of premeditation. In the immediate aftermath of the murder-suicide, Mark Gerardot was understandably a person of interest. He was, after all, connected to both women, one as his wife and the other as his lover. Police needed to rule out any possibility that Mark had been involved in the planning or execution of the crime. Mark's alibi was quickly verified. He had been on his way to meet Meredith for dinner when the tragedy unfolded. His phone records, surveillance footage, and witness statements all corroborated his account. Investigators found no evidence to suggest that he had prior knowledge of Jennair's plans. Despite being cleared as a suspect, Mark's emotional state raised concerns. He was a man grappling with the aftermath of a horrific event, the loss of both his wife and his lover in one devastating moment. In interviews with police, Mark appeared visibly shaken and distraught. His cooperation with authorities was full and transparent, but the weight of his actions and choices bore heavily on him. As the investigation progressed, it became clear that Jennair had acted alone. Her meticulous planning and the evidence she left behind pointed to a single tragic conclusion. Jennair Gerardot was both the perpetrator and the final victim of her own plan. News of the murder-suicide quickly spread, sending shockwaves through the local community and beyond. Radnor Township, a quiet and affluent suburb, was suddenly thrust into the national spotlight. Residents expressed disbelief that such a tragedy could happen in their peaceful neighborhood. Media outlets picked up the story with headlines capturing the shocking details of the crime. The narrative of a love triangle turned deadly captivated the public, sparking discussions about infidelity, mental health, and the consequences of unchecked emotions. Friends and family of the victims struggled to make sense of the tragedy. Statements from Meredith Chapman's loved ones described her as a bright and ambitious woman whose life was cut short far too soon. Jennair's family, on the other hand, grappled with the painful reality that their daughter had committed such a violent act. In the days following the incident, Mark Gerardot also faced public scrutiny. Some questioned his role in the events that led to the tragedy, while others empathized with his unimaginable loss. In the court of public opinion, emotions ran high, and the story of Jennair, Mark and Meredith continued to unfold in the media. The investigation had revealed the facts, but the emotional toll of the crime would linger for years to come. The community of Radnor Township mourned the loss of Meredith Chapman while grappling with the haunting question: could this tragedy have been prevented? In the next chapter, we'll explore the legal proceedings and the aftermath of the case. From the courtroom drama to the impact on the surviving figures, we'll uncover the lasting consequences of a crime that left an indelible mark on all those involved. With the investigation concluded and the tragic events laid bare, the story of Jennair Gerardot, Mark Gerardot, and Meredith Chapman did not simply fade away. It lived on, through public discussions, media coverage, and most notably Mark Gerardot's own words. What followed in the aftermath would shape how this tragedy was perceived and discussed, sparking important conversations around mental health, infidelity, and the devastating impact of unchecked emotions. In the months following the murder-suicide, Mark Gerardot found himself at the center of a media storm. He was no longer just a grieving husband and lover. He became the focal point of a national conversation about betrayal, guilt, and loss. Mark chose to speak publicly about the events that led to the tragedy, hoping to shed light on the complex emotions and decisions that culminated in such a heartbreaking outcome. In interviews with major news outlets, he openly discussed his affair with Meredith Chapman and his remorse over how his actions had contributed to Jennair's emotional deterioration. In one particularly emotional interview, Mark described the moment he walked into Meredith's house and discovered the bodies. "It's a memory that will haunt me for the rest of my life," he said, his voice breaking with emotion. "I lost two people that I cared deeply about in one horrific moment." Seeking to process his grief and make sense of the tragedy, Mark authored a book titled Irreversible: 3 Lives, 2 Deaths, 1 Story That Has to Be Told. In the book, he recounts his experiences in painful detail, providing insight into his mindset during the affair, Jennair's unraveling emotional state, and the events that led to that fateful day. Mark's book became both a personal catharsis and a cautionary tale. It resonated with readers, many of whom reached out to him to share their own stories of infidelity, heartbreak, and mental health struggles. The murder-suicide sent shockwaves through both Delaware and Pennsylvania, leaving an indelible mark on the communities where Jennair and Meredith had lived and worked. In Delaware, where Meredith Chapman had run for state senate and worked at the University of Delaware, her death was a profound loss. Colleagues and friends described her as a passionate advocate for education and innovation, someone with a bright future ahead of her. Her sudden and violent death left a community reeling. In Radnor Township, Pennsylvania, where the crime took place, residents grappled with the horrifying realization that such a tragedy could happen in their quiet neighborhood. Conversations about mental health, infidelity, and the complexities of modern relationships took center stage in community forums, local media, and social circles. Friends and acquaintances of Jennair Gerardot struggled to reconcile the woman they knew with the person who had carried out such a violent act. Many expressed shock, describing Jennair as kind, intelligent, and caring. The revelation of her obsessive surveillance and premeditated attack shattered their perceptions and left them searching for answers. The media quickly picked up on the story, captivated by the tragic love triangle and the shocking details of Jennair's actions. Headlines painted a dramatic picture of love gone wrong, betrayal, and a meticulously planned murder-suicide. One of the most in-depth explorations of the case came from the podcast Bad Thing. The podcast delved into Jennair's mindset, her escalating obsession with Mark's affair, and the tragic events that followed. The series featured interviews with Mark Gerardot, as well as psychological experts who provided insight into Jennair's behavior. The podcast became a platform for discussing broader issues related to mental health, infidelity, and the emotional toll of relationship breakdowns. Listeners were encouraged to reflect on the warning signs of emotional distress and the importance of seeking help when struggling with overwhelming feelings. Beyond the podcast, news articles and televised segments continued to analyze the case, often highlighting the dangers of obsessive behavior and the devastating consequences of unaddressed mental health issues. As the dust settled and the media coverage waned, many were left contemplating the lessons that could be learned from this tragedy. One of the most significant takeaways was the importance of addressing mental health struggles. Jennair Gerardot's actions were the culmination of months of emotional turmoil and unprocessed pain. Experts who analyzed the case emphasized the need for individuals to seek professional help when experiencing feelings of isolation, despair, or obsessive thoughts. Recognizing the signs of emotional distress became another key lesson. Jennair had exhibited behaviors that, in hindsight, indicated she was struggling mentally and emotionally. Her increasing isolation, her obsessive tracking of Mark's activities, and her fixation on Meredith were all red flags that went unnoticed or unaddressed. Another important takeaway was the role of open communication in relationships. The breakdown of communication between Mark and Jennair contributed to the tragic outcome. Experts stressed the importance of honest and empathetic dialogue in preventing misunderstandings and addressing emotional pain before it escalates. Finally, the case underscored the devastating impact of infidelity. The betrayal experienced by Jennair triggered a chain of events that ultimately led to 2 deaths and countless lives forever altered. The story served as a stark reminder of the emotional consequences of extramarital affairs and the importance of seeking healthier ways to navigate relationship challenges. The story of Jennair Gerardot, Mark Gerardot, and Meredith Chapman is one of heartbreak, betrayal, and devastating consequences. It's a tale that forces us to confront difficult truths about mental health, relationships, and the human capacity for both love and despair. As we reach the end of this tragic story, it's important to pause and reflect on the human cost of these events. Jennair Gerardot, Meredith Chapman, 2 lives lost in a devastating moment of desperation and pain. And then there's Mark Gerardot, left to navigate the aftermath, forever haunted by the choices that led to that fateful night. This case reminds us that behind every headline and news story are real people with complex emotions and struggles. Jennair's feelings of betrayal, isolation, and despair were overwhelming, and Meredith's life was tragically cut short before she could fulfill her ambitions. Their families, friends, and communities will forever carry the burden of these losses. Unchecked emotions, particularly feelings of betrayal and abandonment, can have catastrophic consequences. When mental health struggles go unnoticed or untreated, the results can be tragic. This case highlights the importance of recognizing when someone is struggling emotionally and offering support before it's too late. As we reflect on this story, it's natural to wonder, could anything have been done to prevent this tragedy? What would you have done differently if you were in Jennair's, Mark's, or Meredith's position? Would open communication and mental health support have changed the outcome? These are difficult questions with no easy answers. But they are important to ask, because by understanding the emotional and psychological dynamics at play, we can learn how to prevent similar tragedies in the future. At the heart of this story is a message about the importance of mental health. Feelings of anger, betrayal, and despair are part of the human experience, but they don't have to lead to tragedy. Seeking help, whether through counseling, therapy, or simply talking to someone, can make all the difference. If you or someone you know is struggling with emotional or mental health challenges, please remember, you are not alone. There is help available. Sometimes just having someone to listen can be the first step toward healing. If you found this story compelling and thought-provoking, please like this video, share it with others, and subscribe to our channel for more in-depth true crime stories. Your engagement helps us continue to create content that sheds light on these important topics. And as always, stay safe, take care of your mental health, and look out for one another. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you in the next episode.